Hello, good morning. So welcome to our webinar on OKRs and performance management. Nice to see a couple of familiar names in the participant list. Perfect. Let's wait a couple of more seconds until we have a couple of more participants trickling in. So yeah. So welcome. My name is Alessia. I am going to be leading you through the next hour. And we're going to talk about performance management and OKRs and how they can be linked and how they should be linked or should not be linked maybe. So it's a pretty interesting topic that a lot of our customers are facing and that we have advised countless people on and designed successful systems on them as well. So really excited to share a couple of our insights here today. So while we're waiting for others to join, please find the chat and let me know where you're joining from. So we're actually joining from Munich today, from the WorkPath headquarters. Where are you joining from? Feel free to put that in the chat. Oh, the chat is disabled. That's a very good information. Perfect. Then just answer in the Q&A section, I would say. Where are you joining from? Salzburg, Ukraine, Hamburg, Frankfurt, Köln, Graz, Switzerland, Ulm, Finland, Portugal, UK, Budapest, Vienna, India. We are quite diverse today. Very good. Perfect. Quite nice to see such a diverse crowd today. So since we're still counting up in our participant lists. Let's see how many more we can get. We're at 91 people right now. Great to see so many people joining. Great. So maybe let's start into the slides now. So we are going to have 3 bullet points today we're going to cover. We're going to do a quick introduction of me, WorkPath, and OKRs. And then we're going to go into the question how OKRs and performance management could work together. Just a couple of words about myself. My name is Alessia. I am part of the training and enablement team at WorkPath. Been part of that team for quite some time now, several years working with our customers and coaching and training them on all the topics around OKRs. Yes. What about WorkPath? Who are we? We are a company that focuses on achieving outcome orientation with our customers. So basically enabling them through technology and trainings to achieve more outcome orientation, to become more metric driven, and all that through the OKR framework. So a couple of questions up front that you can answer in the poll that's going to pop up in a second. So the first question is, does your company already work with OKRs? And answers could be yes, no, kind of. Now the poll is showing, you can just click. Let's see what the results are here. We have a lot of yeses, around 70% up until now. Quite good. Interesting. Yeah, so we have quite a few of you that already work with OKRs, a couple of you that don't yet work with OKRs, and some that say kind of, which is usually means that you are in the first steps of actually using OKRs. Very good. Nice to see that a lot of practitioners have found their way to us here. To the second poll. So how would you rate your OKR knowledge on a scale from 1 to 10? 1 meaning you've read the Wikipedia article, and 10 meaning you have invented OKRs. Let's see what the results are here. So we have 2 people answering with 10. So apparently you have invented OKRs. Good to know. Let's see. So we have a couple of people in the middle. So some 6s, 7s, and quite a lot of 4s as well. So a mix, I would say. Good to know. So you have at least some OKR knowledge already. Hopefully some of you also visited our courses, so the masterclass, for instance. And there we go. So, I see the chat is now enabled. So one remark up front. So in case you will, so in case you have a question for later, you can write that down in the Q&A section that we have used before. If you write in the chat, we cannot guarantee that it won't be drowned out by comments or by other people posting. So make sure that you only use the chat to actually chat with the others, or maybe like make a comment. And if you have a question, please use the Q&A section to make sure that we will actually answer all your questions. All right, let's start into a quick introduction about OKRs. So one thing that you will see out there is that there are a lot of definitions about OKRs. We at WorkPath have found one that is most speaking to us in terms of our general company purpose, which means that we take a lot of care about writing OKRs in a way that are outcome focused, so not output, not project management, but outcomes, actually strategic outcomes that have customer value and that are actually measurable. So these are things that we as a company really care about because there are a lot of, let's say, different ways of doing OKRs. This is, to us, the one that is most valuable because it aligns with very modern principles of customer centricity and also the possibility of actually measuring if we have achieved a certain value. And to us, the objective is always the question, where do we want to go? So what value are we creating? And the key results would always be the measure. How did we actually validate the value that we have created there? Did we actually get there? Another thing that you will find a lot is that there's going to be a lot of discussions around how do OKRs work with other adjacent processes, such as KPIs, such as performance management as well. And our view is that OKRs would rather bridge a gap that has been there before instead of replacing anything else. So we're not replacing strategic artifacts with OKRs. We're not such as strategic pillars, anything that comes with a PowerPoint, usually in the beginning of the year. We're not replacing KPIs, we're intertwining it and making it, let's say, more informative in kind of like making strategy consumable. So this is what we're trying to do with OKRs. To us, OKRs work in a fixed quarterly or tertial or half-year process. And it's an adaptive one. So if you start working with OKRs, you probably will have to adapt a lot of the process because we as well don't have the aspiration of knowing how exactly the framework can be adapted in your case, but we need to kind of like step-by-step learn from metrics and data to actually apply and structure the process in a way that can be beneficial for your organization. And we believe that OKRs should be dedicated goals for organizations and teams, but we would not use OKRs for individual performance management. And we're going to dive into that a bit in a second. It's kind of controversially discussed a lot, this topic. So this is also probably why we have a lot of interest here. But to us, we have tried this out with several different European companies, and at least for the European market, we have discovered that this is probably the best practice to have OKRs and performance management not as the same thing. So that's basically one thing that we would always stand behind, so to say. But let's dive into the reasons why in a second. So this is a slide kind of illustrating what I've said before. So we would not replace a company strategy, will not replace KPIs. We're bridging the strategy execution gap with OKRs. So if we think that OKRs are like a separate entity that rather bridges the divide between what says in company strategy and what the KPIs say and what goes on the execution level. So we believe that there is, so far, I've not seen another framework that does the same as OKR does. So basically translating how the company strategy kind of like is executed by everything that is being done on the execution level. So this is something that we are very kind of like adamant about, that we're not replacing anything, but we're just bridging a gap that has been there before. So we call this the strategy execution gap. And this is basically what we would see the initiatives, everything that I do in my backlog in Jira, impacting a key result, and that key result kind of translating into achieving the company strategy. Or the key result is translating into achieving an OKR, and that's translating into achieving a company strategy. However, there are several other processes, we call them the adjacent processes, that we have to integrate OKRs with. OKRs touch upon several different things, and here you can only see two, so KPIs and performance management. Of course, there's project management as well, that is quite important, but branching out a bit, it could also be portfolio management or budgeting, and there's a lot of different topics that need to be a lot of new questions that are going to be asked once OKRs are introduced, and most of them are about the adjacent processes. So how does OKRs work with XYZ? And today we're going to zoom in on the performance management and OKR part. If you're interested about the part about strategy execution, so basically the execution levels, project management, Scrum, and all that. We've held a webinar about that a while ago. So you can, I think a couple of weeks ago, so you can go in on our website and find that as well. Yes, so let's have a look how the relationship between OKRs and performance management is laid, and why is that sometimes a bit complicated. So the first questions that you're going to get asked when you introduce OKRs is the teams probably have their own kind of performance management in place, and we have to find a couple of answers to questions that they would probably pose. So these questions are usually about how does performance management OKR, like if OKR comes into play right now, how does that influence compensation, peer feedback, my personal development plans, bonus payments, personal yearly goals, and also personal scorecards in general. So how does this affect my own assessment of my work that I've done? And here, looking at a couple of like clearer questions that we have usually had a couple of times, so to say, like the most frequently asked questions about this are in terms of compensation. So what is the influence of the achievement of OKRs on my team, on like on the compensation, on maybe also the development plans, like will I progress more in my career if I achieve my OKRs more? Or is there something else about maybe bonus payments? Like, does that influence do my OKR achievements actually influence my bonus payments? These kinds of questions need to be answered somehow. And also, how does, like, if I have yearly goals, how do the OKRs relate to that? Because usually our customers have MBOs or have any other yearly goals that they set, and we need to find an answer for the people that have to like work with OKRs. How does this relate to each other? And in general, sometimes we have personal scorecards, like a balanced scorecard, where you just have to understand how do the KPIs that are in that scorecard actually relate to the OKRs. And here's something I'd like to say is that our customers usually don't have a uniform way of talking about this. So if I say performance management, when I talk to 5 customers about this, they all might mean something else. So these are things, among others, that are part of personal scorecards about the performance management of individuals. So if we're not kind of like super able to delineate this, it's because our customers don't use it this way as well. Like you might find MBOs that have KPIs in it, but also kind of like qualitative goals as well. So there's the first thing that we would always do is kind of like analyze, like, what does our customer mean when they say performance management? And that can vary a lot. So this is the first question that you also have to ask yourself. What is performance management to us, and what is OKR for us, and how can we make this work together? So just having a look at typical performance management approaches, one of it is that we have these kind of like different categories of goals. So we oftentimes have behavioral goals, which are kind of how do I work in a team? How am I like in collaboration? And what is kind of like my behavior in terms of in the workplace, and how do I work with others, and all these things. And this can be one part of actually performance management. Then sometimes it's when it comes to more like the content and domain knowledge related things, sometimes it's output that is measured. So actually how many calls do I make as a sales representative, or how many like things have I shipped as a product engineering team. So these kinds of things probably would be a part of this as well. And a lot of which is rare is that you have actually outcome-oriented KPIs that measure the actual achievement of it. So how many more customer have been active on our platform because the product team has actually done a good job. So these kinds of things are rarely part of it. And then you have learning and development goals. So did I progress in my career? Did I develop on my career path a bit more? Did I develop as a leader more? So these kinds of things as well. So behavioral goals, performance goals, and learning and development goals. This is generally what encompasses performance management. And then going into, if we go into the actual challenges that we have most with OKRs and performance management, here we have two different aspects that we'd like to discuss. So if we have the new kid on the block, so to say, that are the OKRs, there's two kind of trends that we can see a lot. So one is trying to use OKRs as performance management. So actually using OKRs in peer in like one-on-ones, and actually employee appraisals and all that. And this can be one trend that we want to lean towards, because we have these two systems, and that's the easy way to integrate it, right? So have performance management systems and OKRs, and use that both to determine bonuses, career paths, and all that. However, most of you know that OKRs are a system of hypotheses. So it is basically just measuring the impact that we're trying to have. There's no guarantee that because I update a feature, because I launch a new product on the market, that this will be successful. And it's also kind of a question if this is kind of like an impact that I can even have. So I'm working with a lot of teams that if OKRs are used for performance management, that sometimes they will try to only go to the safe bets, they will only do the things that they actually know they can achieve. And this is not what OKRs are usually. I'm not 100% subscribing to the whole moonshot philosophy that is present a lot in American companies, because I've not in the European space, I've not seen many companies that have the company culture where I can just say, like, I am setting a goal that's only going to be achieved by 70% and everybody's fine with it. So I've not seen that a lot. But at the same time, OKRs should be treated as a hypothesis system, that this is, I hypothesize that with this increment of value creation that I'm measured with actually leading indicators that measure the value that I've created, with this kind of concept and with this increment of value creation, I assume that I can impact a higher number, a higher metric, a key result on a different level. So this would be something that I always would like to maintain, because we live in a very complex world. There is no causality. If I do this, then I will automatically make more revenue or like achieve more. So there are certain steps that we can make to prove that hypothesis, but it's probably not going to be like a causality, like if I do this, then I will be able to impact this number. So this is why I'm kind of like hesitant to use OKRs as performance management, mainly because I also don't believe that we should dampen the level of ambition that we have with OKR sometimes. So that's what we call sandbagging, right? Sometimes we would see that the teams that actually set OKRs as performance management, or that factors into a high degree into the performance management, they will be super conservative about setting their goals. They will not be as innovative. They will try to save bets. And this is nothing that we actually want to foster. So we want to like have them try out maybe also the risky parts of it, and also kind of like set a performance management metrics that they can actually impact. So this is something that is discussed a lot of the OKR community, but that's basically just something that we noticed from our customers that do the OKRs as performance management. And at the same time, something other than just the sandbagging and overstating accomplishment, stagnating innovation, other than that, we feel like we see that a lot of the teams that do that, they actually have then personal OKRs somehow, right? So that the OKRs become something very personal, and that you only work on that instead of actually working on maybe OKRs that are not in your own team, but that you align to and that you promise contributions to. So if you use the OKRs that you have set as a team as performance management, it will oftentimes lead to less collaboration on the goals that are not your own. So this is something that I will also like to consider before you make the decision to use OKRs as performance management. And then something else that we see is that there are differences in kind of the content of the performance management system that we already have in place and the OKR topics. So sometimes we see that there are on the leadership level different incentivizations that leads the leaders not want to support the OKRs of the teams, but rather focus on topics that they actually would get the bonus measured on. So this is something that we have to make sure. So the thing we will have sometimes the OKR, if OKR is actually tied to compensation, we oftentimes have this moment where we just stop working on the things that are kind of like motivating us to think about like our own impact that we can have, and rather going for the things that make us money, so to say, right? So I always compare it with, imagine you're on a city tour in Paris and you have like an umbrella going up that you're supposed to follow, and then a different one goes up. Which one are you going to follow? The one that gives you money, or the one that actually measures your impact on the company? So OKRs or performance management, and anything that is tied to compensation there. And yeah, then also we have the fact that sometimes it's not synchronized. Sometimes we have goals that lead into entirely different directions. So the first instant that we have to do is to actually map this out somehow, because we cannot keep having two different incentivization structures in a company. And yeah, it also having performance management as competing with OKRs leads to not focusing on the outcomes, but rather focusing on the goals, our personal goals that actually create, that make us money, right? So, and less on the team goals. So on one hand, having OKRs as performance management has some downsides to it. On the other side, having them totally separate is also not the right way to go. So, and with a lot of different things that we try to kind of like change in our customers' organizations, the thing that we try most is actually say, like, what would we lose if we do it like this? And this is exactly what you should think about when you start working on integrating OKRs with performance management, and see kind of like what are the negative effects that we can expect. And these are just a few of them. And how can we counteract this? So to answer a couple of those questions, how we have solved these problems, I can show you a couple of examples in the following slides. So our kind of like strategy when it comes to OKRs and management is to have it as two separate but aligned systems. So I always compare it to train tracks that kind of like go through the mountains. They are not leading in different directions. So it's not the performance management as a competing system. And it's also not, they also don't overlap. So this is kind of like where we need to be at. So having them loosely coupled, but tightly aligned. So going in the same directions, not contradicting them each other, but still also not overlapping, and kind of like trying to serve the same purpose, which they actually are not. Like performance management is more supposed to be on an individual level, and the OKRs are the team goals. So how do we make this work? One part, so to mitigate the performance management as competing system, we have a couple of best practices that I want to share with you. So one is make sure that you don't have conflicting goals in place. Make sure you don't have two umbrellas that lead into different directions. If you have frictions that are sometimes maybe even healthy, then you need to address them and mitigate them. And teams will need to understand where do they profit more from, like following the OKRs or actually following the contradictive MBOs or scorecards that we actually set up. So make sure they don't get incentivized into different directions. And here, sometimes we have the challenge that most, let's say most goals on that level are like on the higher leadership level. So here we need to have some sort of neutral instance, maybe the people team, maybe HR teams that actually make sure that they don't contradict and they don't run into different directions. So here we often have an issue of transparency because goals sometimes are not, like personal goals, especially on the management level, are often not transparent. So this is something that needs to be managed centrally, and that we need to make sure that even though we as a team don't have insights into our boss's performance management, we need to have somebody who does and who checks that and who makes sure that our boss is not incentivized to like go against our goals or like drive us into a different direction and not help us enough. So this is something that we need to actually address openly, and that needs to be centrally steered. And then something that we actually would like to do is add some sort of, you've seen behavioral goals before, right? So add some sort of behavioral goals that foster cross-functional collaboration. So to make sure that we're not incentivized to only go after our own goals, but kind of have, if we combine this in some way, to have the not only our own goals as partly a factor in our performance management, but also have cross-functional behavioral goals that we assess each other about and say like, and give peer feedback on how are we actually supporting the goals, and are we actually collaborating in a way that we would like to, that is ideal. So including that in the personal evaluation of the teams, or like in the individuals, and making it transparent that cross-functional collaboration and teamwork are some things to be fostered, and that something that we would also get assessed on. So that could be one aspect as well. Yeah, and something that a lot of our customers are actually doing right now is already abolishing individual goals and only having team goals, and having team goals and company goals as parts of the overall appraisals of the people. So we have those companies that we have that are updating this and have been thinking about performance management even before OKRs, rethinking it somehow. They have actually abolished individual goals. So that's kind of like that's what I believe would be the best scenario as well. So make sure you don't have conflicting goals. Make sure that cross-functional collaboration, teamwork are factors in individual performance management in the behavioral goals. And on the other hand, if that is a possibility, focus on team goals and don't focus on individual goals in performance management. Then integrating OKRs in performance management. So I kind of stated this a couple of times where we don't believe that individual OKRs are a good idea. So personal OKRs that are used for performance management, to me, are not the way to go. Like, one, because we will probably focus more on our own OKRs than on the team OKRs. And two, most of our customers have too many OKRs in general. Imagine a bigger corporation that imagine every single one person of that would actually write personal OKRs next to the team OKRs. To me, this also would be like a volume that is not manageable, but that's just a kind of like practical thing. And on the other hand, I don't recommend to integrate to kind of like make it as performance management, because we will have the effect that I mentioned before, right? That we will not be working on our teams, on the most like ambitious goals in our teams, but we'll actually start sandbagging and start playing the safe bets, and not being focused enough on the outcomes. And probably will be, there's this still kind of a opportunity for growth in a failure culture in most of the companies that we work with. And this is definitely not fostering it. So OKRs are supposed to be fostering failure culture, because we learn and see what values can we even measure in one cycle. And this needs to be something that needs to be happening in a safe space where we can just slowly move towards improving about this. And we need to account for the complexity that we live in, that we usually don't have like an, if I do this, then I will achieve this dynamic. And yeah, that's something that we have pretty strong feelings about. But in the end, if you want to combine this, we also have a couple of tips on how to do that. So the only thing that we wouldn't do is to actually have individual OKRs, so personal OKRs, but we need to somehow make sure that we are aligned in and we are loosely coupled, right? So this is something that we want to always make sure of, but not integrating OKRs too tightly into performance management. So what can we do instead of integrating it entirely? Something that I've seen a lot is, and I see work perfectly well, is one thing that is the kind of like have team OKR achievement. If you have individual performance evaluations, have it as a very small, one of the different factors that we would assess individual performance of, have the team OKRs as that, but only a very, very low number. So if you have 3% of the team performance being factored into your own appraisal, then you will probably not act against the team OKRs. So then you would be incentivized to at least stay on the track with the others. So this is one aspect that we can recommend. Include it to a very, very small percentage, the team OKR achievement into your individual performance evaluation, but make sure it's not too big of an amount, so that people will start being less innovative and less and being too risk averse to actually set good OKRs. So that's the first advice that we can give here. And then something I've seen a couple of our customers try out is to factor in a difficulty level. So basically making sure that it's not just in the rate of OKR achievement that counts, but also a rating on how hard this was for the teams. So basically this would be something that the team and the managers and maybe like a neighboring team that paid into these OKRs will assess. So having that kind of like a different factor and not just the pure OKR achievement factored into the performance management. Something else that I've seen is having a balanced mix of committed and ambitious OKRs. So that we have a rule, probably if you're using OKR, you know that there is the 40-60 rule, that we believe that 40% of the OKRs of the OKR portfolio on one team level should consist of topics that come from top down, and 60% of those should actually be bottom up topics that we actually thought of. So this kind of logic can be applied to committed and ambitious OKRs as well. So you just have some that are bonus dependent, where you say, I can reach these pretty sure, and some that are ambitious, and you kind of like calculate also the achievement of the OKRs, also dependent on how many committed and how many bonus dependent, how many ambitious OKRs you had in the portfolio of each team. So this is kind of like comes down to statistics and math to make sure that we not just have the one factor of how much did my team achieve, but mix it with kind of like more nuanced assessments of like that what we achieved, how hard was that, or how many things did we already know we can commit to this. So actually making a mix of committed and ambitious OKRs a rule, and from that calculating the OKR, the factor that factors into performance evaluation a bit more in a bit more nuanced way, and not just the pure achievement. And then when providing an OKR dependent team bonus, I would always factor in cross-functional feedback. So making sure that we are not only working on our own team goals, but we also are not incentivized to stop working on other teams' OKRs. Because what will happen is that if I write OKRs about some topic that my bonus is dependent on, and I'm 100% and I'm expected to 100% achieve this, then I usually would not be inclined to spend any more time on other people's goals, or the collaborating on initiatives, or even collaborating on key results that other teams have set themselves. So this is something that I would always then counteract, like this effect of not only caring about my own kind of like sphere of influence. That's something I would actually like to counteract if you decide to link OKRs and performance management, and make sure that there's cross-functional feedback that also factors into the bonus payment rate, and to encourage greater collaboration and alignment. So these are a couple of tips that I can give you if you decide to integrate OKRs with performance management, at least to a certain degree. So to me, it's, in general, we always have to ask, what do we lose and what could be negative effects if we integrate these things? And there's not a perfect answer. It would not be possible for any of me, for any of us at WorkPath to tell you what works best for you. But these are just suggestions and best practices that you just need to take, question if this could work for you, and make sure that you test how this comes across. And something that I would advise you to do as well, next to the best practices that we just showed, and to evaluate that and kind of like taking it with a grain of salt and seeing if they actually work for you, is to think, what is performance management containing right now for us? What is it supposed to do? So what outcomes do we want to achieve with the performance management? And why did we introduce OKRs? And what is that supposed to represent? And make sure they don't overlap. So I have one example that I've for a customer that actually approached me. They didn't have any performance management yet on an individual level, and they approached me and asked me, what would you do? And to be honest, if in the ideal world, if I could choose, I would use the anything that is about content related goals. So anything about like what strategy am I applying, what things am I working on? All these strategic topics I would actually put into OKRs. And in the performance management, only have behavioral topics and personal development goals. That to me would be the ideal scenario. Because everything else, we would probably also have a look at KPIs, and those would kind of like factor into the content related topics. But usually KPIs are no leading indicators that I can actually influence automatically with what I do on my own level. Usually there's too many different teams paying into the same KPI, so we cannot really distill back whose impact was like how much. So this is kind of like one of the reasons why I don't believe that KPIs are the best thing for performance management. I'm working with a couple of customers right now that are in innovation and corporate innovation, and they get the performance management is structured in a way that they will be accountable for the innovations that are being applied into the products. But there's so many things removed in the impact chain there that I would actually prefer that they slice this a bit like smaller and see what is the exact impact that we can have. Yeah, so much for the recommendations that we have. And now we're going to move into the Q&A section. So if you have any questions, please put them into the Q&A. And then we can start answering those questions. So we have one question. Is there a session where you dive into the linkage of OKRs planning on a company strategic level on one side and processes around budgeting and strategic KPI performance on the other? So I think we don't have that kind of session planned yet, but I think it's a good suggestion. So maybe to my colleagues in the background operating for the marketing team, organizing these webinars, I think that would be a good idea to plan one of these sessions in. I think there is a webinar on our website on KPIs and OKRs in general. That's something you can already check out. But yeah, the budgeting aspect is one that is quite interesting. So, question from Claudio. Do we need performance management at all if we use OKRs? I think that's a great question. So to me, it goes back to what are you actually trying to achieve with performance management? And is OKR a good way to achieve that? So what is the outcome that you're striving for in performance management? And what is the outcome of OKRs that you use in your company? So I'm sure that there are some things that, so to me, if I would just have OKRs is that to me is a scenario that is quite unlikely, since there usually is something like performance management in every company, or at least some sort of team goals. And I don't believe that performance management is bad at all. I think we need that. I think we need to have kind of like an assessment and see like, can I be promoted? Can I, how am I, what factors am I doing right now? What factors am I achieving right now that would give me the basis of actually arguing for a promotion, for instance. So also from the employee point of view, right? So I need to have some sort of evaluation. I want to know how am I doing? And maybe that's the purpose of performance management in most companies, whereas OKRs is rather a question, how are we executing the strategy, and what kind of outcomes, what customer values are we creating? And of course, as I said, it makes sense to have some sort of linkage there, but they shouldn't influence each other too much. So having behavioral goals. So if we go back a couple of slides to the this kind of aspect. So having behavioral goals, like how good am I at team working? How am my technical knowledge? Like how is my what are my efficiency metrics that I might want to have a look at? I believe that could still be beneficial to look at that, but independently of OKRs. So to me, it might be rather just a distinct purpose, and therefore we need to see how does it make sense to combine these two aspects. All right, so will WorkPath offer in the future a centralized option to have performance management and OKR in one platform, but in different sections? So far, our roadmap does not include that. One, because there's so many different ways of living performance management. And the only thing that is kind of close to that is the KPI functionality that we have, where we would probably see the metrics on one hand, so all KPIs that we want to measure in general, which metrics do we need to check, health metrics, efficiency metrics on one hand, and on the other hand, the OKRs. So I believe that both are relevant to for strategy execution, but I believe that it's probably not the scope to really, if we believe that we shouldn't integrate 100% these two worlds, then I think it will also be like a philosophical question if that actually speaking to our plans that we have in terms of creating more safe space for outcome management and these kinds of aspects. We used to have a feedback functionality, but so from the customer feedback, it was not the aspects that our customers were more, let's say, used to or like into. And I also believe that we don't have to build all the tools ourselves. We will probably, if we go into that direction, it will probably be through integrations and trying to integrate performance management platforms with OKRs and see how we can manage that. All right, thanks a lot. Next question. You recommended not using individual OKRs, but presumably individuals also need to set goals for themselves. What goal setting systems do you recommend for this, if not OKRs? So I think that question has been answered before. I actually believe that performance management is a good way to do that. We also so internally, like if I can spill the beans a bit, we internally have scorecards that measure KPIs, but also have kind of behavioral goals in them as well. So skills that we want to achieve, kind of steps in our development plans. And these things are super important. And these kinds of scorecards are goals for ourselves, for our own development, are super important, but they're not linked to OKRs. So to me, this is why this is a good way to do it, because you kind of need that guidance as a person, as an individual. Where am I going? Where am I progressing? And how does the company also help me progress? Which is getting with the war of talents and even more an important question. So actually having this kind of the possibility to develop further as a person through performance management, but at the same time, not having that connected to goal achievement that is outside of my own circle of influence, right? The team goal, I can never influence the team goal enough that I would want that to factor into my own performance evaluation. So I could be the best at performing, right, on a goal, and did everything I had to do, but most of my teams were kind of like overworked or didn't have or were blocked by the manager or whatever else could happen, right? So I wouldn't have that as too much of a high factor into my own performance evaluation, to be honest. So yeah, from the individual standpoint, I would like to have something that I can influence. If I can say, for instance, the trainings that I do, I can have that into my own performance evaluation, say like, what's the feedback? How much do people like Alessia's trainings? That's something I could stand behind if this is something that people would evaluate my own like promotions or like bonuses or whatever for. Everything else that is more a team effort, I find that tricky to find, to kind of like coin that back and to make sure that my influence is high enough, even though like 7 other people are also contributing to the same goal. So, all right, individual bonus target versus team targets. What kind of content in each? So yeah, I think the team targets that I would like to have, of course, we can also have yearly targets as a team that kind of focus on like how well are we solving our problems, how well are we collaborating, all kind of like the base, probably based on retros that we have had before. How do we as a team want to develop? This would be something that I can see on even like a yearly scale to be interesting. If those have to be OKRs, that's the question. So I could also have yearly OKRs that just are on like team building, for instance, and then have quarterly OKRs that are just about how are we executing the strategy. So this is something that I could see on the team level, and the individual bonus targets. As I said, performance management is a perfectly fine way to do that. The question is just to what degree do we want to integrate it, and what could be the adverse effects that we need to manage there. Yes, could you describe a format for OKR setting and reviewing for larger organizations, so 500 employees and more, so workshop formats, conferences, online collaboration tools, any hints? So I believe that, well, we at WorkPath believe that we have the only chance to actually manage something like this is through multipliers. And here we have let's say usually we start with a pilot where we conduct trainings with a set of multipliers. They then go back to the teams. We have and teach them how to do proper OKRs, and all that kind of like writing OKRs in a synchronized cycle. So everybody starts at the same time to write their OKRs. We align them all at the same time. And a method that I like a lot there is to give the responsibility to the teams, not having that managed by anybody else, but kind of like have the team put the transparency and let's say the strive for outcomes into the teams themselves. So making them responsible for setting the OKRs, of course, helping them out as a manager, for instance, but giving them the responsibility. So in the next 3 days, we're going to all draft OKRs, and then we're all going to align. And they should do that in like smaller groups. One of the most important hints that I can give you in terms of workshop formats is that make sure everybody who's there has a job. Everybody who's there actually is valuable in that minute, and no, you're not wasting anybody's time. In terms of collaboration tools, of course, I can recommend WorkPath, especially when it comes to drafting OKRs in an outcome-centric way. I can recommend everything that we do in the tool in general. And especially in large companies, the alignment is something that is most painful. So we usually start with drafting OKRs. And if everybody drafts OKRs based on larger company priorities, then we also have the situation where we need to make sure that we are aligned horizontally, right? Because we're kind of like vertically aligned already. And then we need to talk about who else is on our level and what are they doing? And is there any double work that we can counteract? And here, especially a tool like WorkPath can help to screen for alignment potential and to make sure that we are not doing double work, that we are quite aligned, and making sure that we're all working in the same direction, but don't like step on each other's feet. But Thomas, if you want to know more about that, we host masterclasses on OKRs, held by yours truly, among others. And feel free to join one of those where you can deep dive more into these topics. So what's your pay philosophy? Pay for performance, and is that linked to OKRs and performance reviews? So in the end, I think it's that is always a bit tricky to kind of like answer with just one phrase. To me, there's a couple of things that should pay into this. Like one is performance in general, but how can we make sure that performance and effort are kind of like the only factors that we're looking at there right now? You know, sometimes if we so let me just name a best practice from the reviews that I conduct. So if I conduct a review, I will ask them 2 questions. One, what's the goal progress, which is usually calculated if you use a tool like WorkPath. And the second is, how happy are you with the results? And there you will get the most surprises, because you can have worked effortless, like very hard on achieving OKRs. You have done the initiatives had an impact on the key results. But then there's also the situations where you, I don't know, set the wrong goals, you had a wrong metric in there. And you will need to have the time to kind of learn from that as well. So making sure that you get the right set of metrics over time, which you don't have yet. So that's one of the most difficult problems for most of our customers, is that they don't have the right metrics, because they have never asked the question, what metrics, how can we measure the impact of every single thing that we do? How can we measure the value that we can create within one cycle? Usually they have metrics that span more than one cycle. Usually they can measure an aggregated number, but not the impact of one team. So building up these measuring capabilities is something that all of our customers have in common as a project. And this, to me, excludes a pure, let's say, a pure evaluation of performance based on these metrics. Because if you don't have the metrics yet, and if you are building them up right now, and if it's so hard to say, like, because I did that, this metric went up, I would need that. I would need these metrics that very, very pinpoint to every single person. This is the contribution that every individual of you has had on this. And to me, this is most performance management tools, or like kind of like scorecards that I've seen, they don't really account for the complexity of this. So to me, it's kind of hard to answer this question in a very simple way, because there should be different things as well in there. And in the example of the review, I think it's important to acknowledge, if a team says, like, my goal achievement is 3, but my happiness about the goal is 10, I should like go in there and ask for them, like, why did you put a 10 in there? Like, you're very satisfied with that low goal achievement. And they sometimes will say, well, yes, because I worked so hard on this and I had so many blockers from all over that didn't have anything to do with the effort that I put in, that I'm very happy with this result. And if I get an answer like this, it gets even harder to kind of pinpoint performance and pay for performance methodology or like philosophy in this space. So yeah, that's kind of like, I have a torn view on this, because I know we have to like evaluate onto some degrees, but if you don't have the right metrics, and if we have to account for individual situations where we actually did put in the work and performed, but we just didn't see the impact on the metric for different reasons, for war starting, COVID starting, all of these things, I think that those things just need to be like factored out in some way. And also believe that behavioral goals and the aspect that I mentioned before in performance management should count equally as much. All right. How would you treat OKRs and performance management while collaborating with an external development team? Dynamics are extremely sensitive and delicate. So I would actually need to know in what ways the dynamics are sensitive and delicate. I believe that there should be, OKRs can actually be a great tool to foster the communication there a bit better. So making sure that we have the right metrics and we know that what the contribution is from the external development teams, and making sure that we know what their impact is. I'm not sure how external development teams can actually be performance evaluated by then anything else than their own kind of like agencies or wherever they come from. So this is kind of a tricky aspect, but to me, I see OKRs, at least OKRs, I can see there as a very good tool to make sure we know what our impact is onto things that we can probably influence to a certain degree. And maybe in that situation where like the impact is even more removed, I would maybe not even performance management in that case that much. So. All right, next one, Zanya asked the question, from your experiences, as of when amount of people, teams, goals, does it make sense to use an OKR tool versus using Miro, Excel as an overview? Do you have an integration with the performance management in the tool, or is that separate? So we don't have an integration right now, but we have quite a good API, and we also have a team that is solely working on integration. So this could be, if we have a good use case for that, we can like take that into account as well. Regarding your other question, so I believe that there is the amount of let's say goals is one of the most determining factors when it comes to needing an OKR tool. I've done because we work also I also work with customers that are not yet on our tool. My experience is that as soon as I have more than 30 goals, it usually doesn't work that well anymore. We have used Miro before with those teams, but there's so many things that just get exhaustive. If you cannot, I mean, you can use the general problem with like using two tools, you would have like Miro and Excel, is that you have one for visualization and the other for progress. And integrating that sometimes is tricky because you don't all have it on one view. So I also sometimes use myself, if I can't use the tool yet, I use Miro for alignment and to make sure that we're all like collaborated, that you have kind of like the chain of value creation that we actually want to have visualized. I would use it for that. But yeah, at the same time, the breaking point is different sometimes. We have, I recently worked with a team that only has like 7 OKRs or 8 OKRs, and they already said like, no, we don't want to do this anymore in like in Excel. So the breaking point is different, but in my experience, as soon as you have more than 30 OKRs, it gets too hard to handle, and you probably should think about using a tool as well. And if you also want to like develop your own like OKR process better and more intensely through metrics, then also a tool could be nice, because then you can actually do analysis on the data that you get from the tool. At WorkPath, we actually have an analytics suite that actually does that. So that could be also an advantage to do it. But below that, I don't think you really need one. So did I understand correctly if you say OKRs is about what the team needs to do to generate value for the customer, and performance management is about the how? Yes, Chris, that's very well summed up. I would say the one is about the what, and the other is about how are we doing, how are we collaborating, how are we working. We could think about ingraining the having that as a general assumption. We want to have the OKRs in terms of like, what are we doing, why are we doing things as well. Like, it's not just the what, it's also the why, because it's the why are we doing this, what are we doing this for, and on the other hand, how could be the answer to performance management. Very well. Then what would be an ideal incentivization for the achievements of OKRs if not financial, whereas performance management is often related to financial incentivization. If no incentivization, employees usually value performance management over achieving OKRs. So to me, it shouldn't be. So that's the thing, like if I have OKRs tied to performance management and financial incentives, and I'm trying to combine OKRs and performance management, then I would have this problem, because then I would always be superseded. So the intrinsic motivation of OKRs, which is what impact do I have? I usually don't need to be rewarded to actually understand what kind of impact did I have on the company. And so basically, I would say, like, for OKRs, I don't really need any incentivization because it's intrinsic motivation. Extrinsic motivation with performance management is usually superseded if they are combined, and this is kind of like the thing that I would like would avoid. All right, so let's have a look at the time. So Phil has a last question. I think, Phil, if you would like to discuss this, you can just send me an email. discuss this. Maybe it would be interesting to kind of like dig deeper into this in a one-to-one conversation. So yeah, I would say, Phil, please write me an email about this so we can discuss this a bit longer, because now we're unfortunately running out of time. So thanks a lot for your questions and your engagement. I really enjoyed holding this webinar for you. You will receive the recording afterwards and also the slides and all the material. And yeah, thanks a lot for joining, and yeah, see you next time.